Well, Neil, it's a pleasure to get to speak to you. I read your book, When a Sparrow Falls, and um, it just kind of blew me away. But so I'd like to get your take on humanity's future and everything else. But before we do that, could you say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Neil Sharpson. I'm a writer, a full-time writer based in Dublin, Ireland. My first book, When the Sparrow Falls, came out in summer of 2021, and my second book, Knock Knock Open Wide, will be out this year in September of this year.
I look forward to reading the second book. Uh, not to spoil too much, but how do you think it compares to the first?
That's a good. Well, okay. So the first is When the Sparrow Falls was it was a very it got me through a very difficult time in my life. So I don't know if you it was originally it's actually started out as a script, as a stage play, and I was writing it on and off for since around I think I started writing it in around 2012. So it was kind of like, and it was just it was something I kept picking up and putting back and picking up and putting back. And then in 2017, I had a bit of I had a mental health crisis basically, and two very big writing opportunities just kind of like went up in smoke in the space of a single month, and I went to a very bad place. And so I realized I needed to decouple my sense of self-worth from how well my writing was doing, because that was what that had been the kind of like the mistake that I'd made. So I said I need to write something where it doesn't matter if it doesn't get published, it doesn't matter if no one ever sees it. I will know that I wrote it and that'll be enough. And that's how I kind of like started actually adapting the play into a novel. And so it kind of like that became kind of like my form of self-therapy. So, which is a very long way of saying I can't really judge that book objectively, because I feel it's kind of like a friend that got me through a very bad time and changed my life. Like this, because of this book, I was able to kind of like to quit my job finally and kind of like just start doing writing full time, and I get to kind of like see my kids more now, and I get to work from home, and my hair color started to come back, and like rainbows and unicorns started to appear. So that book is will always be something I have a very kind of like close and biased relationship with. Whereas Knock Knock Open Wide, it's a book that I'm very proud of, and I think in many ways I've taken all the stuff that I learned from writing When the Sparrow Falls, and I think it's probably if you gave both books to kind of like a literary scholar, they'd probably say the second one is just like is stronger, but I'll never have the same kind of like attachment to it that I did to kind of like to When the Sparrow Falls. A good thing you put the timer on, by the way, because that's the first question, and I think that I don't know how long I was talking about this.
But that was really interesting because I wanted to ask you, the Caspian Republic is a very dark place.
Mhm.
It's very, um, people on it's our territorian. Um, I mean, people get killed just at a whim. Violence is a normal thing. But yet they're trying to hold on to something that they value very
Mhm.
much, which is this idea that this is the last bit of humans acting as humans before AI kind of
Mhm.
provides and controls and people
Yeah.
are able to kind of get assimilated. Um, and with the background story, it feels a little bit. Um, I mean, it provides a little bit more insight on how you got to that place. But um, uh, what made you choose a country off of the Caspian Sea as the setting?
Right. So I think the original kind of kernel of the idea was I wanted to like I saw the 2011 version of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, and it really was just I want to write something like that. I want to write that kind of like something with that atmosphere. And but I was terrified of kind of getting the details wrong. And so I didn't just kind of like want to set it in kind of like East Germany in the 1970s or whatever, because I just the amount of research I would have to do to be not get constantly paranoid. I didn't have the time to do it. So I said, well, if I set it in the future, I just create this country from the ground up. Then I don't have to worry about the details because I'll be the one who creates the details. Why it was on the Caspian Sea, I had this, I just kind of this weird idea because again, because it started as a stage play, and I said, and I thought to myself, like, so many fantastic plays have the word sea in the title. Like Chekhov's The Seagull and Conor McPherson's The Seafarer, and there's loads of it. And I thought just calling it the Caspian Sea, that was the name of the play. I thought that's a good name for a Cold War thriller. So I set it became the Caspian Republic, and I set it in Azerbaijan. So the territory of the Caspian Republic is what's currently Azerbaijan, because if it was the only country around the Caspian Sea that doesn't really have a lot of baggage in the kind of like the Western mind. So like if I said it in Russia, people would say, "Oh, this is comment on Putin and kind of like post-Soviet Union." And if I said it in Iran, it's like, "Oh, it's about the mullahs." If I said it in where else is there? Kazakhstan, people just lead to Borat, unfortunately. So it was Azerbaijan was the only place that I could set it in that, wouldn't, I felt I could kind of put my own stamp on it. And yeah, so that was it was just kind of like just little, nothing more kind of like profound than that. It was just kind of like, it felt like a good place to set a science fiction novel.
Just a random fact that kind of has, if you look at the Venn diagram of relevance, that's a very small intersection. But so the International Astronautical Congress is a space conference that happens every year.
Mm-hmm.
It's the oldest space conference that's been around since back during the time of Sputnik.
Yeah.
And it's hosted by a different country every year. And this year it's in Baku. So,
I knew as soon as you brought it up, I said it's going to be in Baku, isn't it?
yeah. So you kind of have two themes about the future. You have AI taking over in terms of resource allocation and everything. And you have people kind of transcending their bodies and becoming mind only. I guess on the first one, how strongly do you think we might actually be ending up in that future?
It's not very likely, I gotta say. So it's less. I mean, I wrote the book is less kind of like about, oh, this is where this. It wasn't an exercise in futurism at all. It wasn't saying, oh, this is where we're going to go. It was more kind of like a philosophical look at basically, the modern world as a Cold War, and kind of like the two camps and the kind of like, so the kind of, and the need to kind of like to recognize humanity in each other. One of the interesting things I discovered when I was doing research for it was, so I went online and I was just kind of like, because I don't have a background in like programming or anything like that. So I said, okay, I'm writing a book where where there's this technology where human consciousness can be digitized and uploaded. What are the practical and technological limitations that I have to write around or explain away, when saying, well, they cracked it by doing this technobabble, and one the answers I got were basically, what you're talking about is flat out impossible, because we can't digitize human consciousness because we don't understand what human consciousness is. And we may not be able to understand what human consciousness is. That could actually very well be just a hard limit on, if we were simple enough to understand, we'd be too simple to it's a catch-22, we're complicated enough that we're too complicated to understand why we're so complicated. So again, I hand waved it in the book by basically just saying, well, we didn't actually figure out how to do it. We just invented an AI that figured out how to do it, which is how a lot of which is basically how YouTube algorithms kind of work. We didn't actually build the algorithms. We just built a program whose job it was to create billions upon billions of these algorithms, and then we just took the ones that somehow worked, and we just gave them to the machine and say, build more like these. And so it's basically almost like an accelerated process of evolution, but we don't actually know how it does it. Which is a little bit terrifying in and of itself. But that was kind of like, so that was kind of like how I just kind of like explained that away. But to answer your question, no, I don't think, I don't see it. I don't see that I don't see that ever kind of like really coming to pass.
Um, both of those trends, like the having the AI that kind of manages the world, and
Okay, maybe. All right. So the digitization of human consciousness, no way. I don't think so. AI kind of like, yeah, I think that's far more plausible. And in a way, it's kind of, you're already kind of like seeing it to a degree. Now, in the book, it's basically flawless. Like the AI have actually surpassed us, and they they've essentially rendered kind of like, government by human beings irrelevant, because whatever the triumvirate in the book, they don't run the world. They're just serving in an advisory capacity. But if you have an advisor who will always be 100% right, and you would obviously, you would just do whatever they said, at which point, who's really running the world, you know?
mhm.
Yeah, you have the choice to not obey the machine. You have the choice to be wrong, and you have the choice to kind of like to take responsibility for whatever catastrophic action. So is it even free will? You know? But I don't think we'll ever get to that stage where the AI is absolutely perfect. But definitely you can build a computer program that can beat almost any human being at chess. You can build a computer program that can do pretty much anything that a human being can do by thinking. It's the trick is doing something that a human being can do without thinking. Like, um, like, it's almost impossible to get a computer program to be able to tell the difference between a cat and a dog, right? You and I can do that. That is so simple for us. You just look at it and say, that's a dog, that's a cat. But how do you describe that to a computer? How do you say, it's a small furry animal, domesticated, it's carnivorous, it has four legs, it has a tail, it has kind of like lots of different it's kind of like, it is actually, it's very, and there's loads of these kind of areas where we just know how to do it. And that's kind of like, that's your kind of, I think you're getting into that kind of like that weird metaphysical, we don't actually know what this is, and we can't really explain it, and we can't really design a computer that does it. But so I think no to the first, yes to the second, but to a degree. It's gonna be it's gonna be a lot crapper. It's gonna be like the kind of like, we have AI, we have AI at home. It's kind of like, it's not gonna be as impressive as that. I don't think.
Well, my sons, they always, at least especially my oldest one, he sees AI as being like the end of humanity.
Mm.
You create an AI that's uh, who's tasked with some just kind of mundane,
Mm.
very focused activity, and it basically optimizes the world for that activity. And he
Yeah,
uses
just turns the whole world into paper clips. Yeah, that's. Um, I mean, yeah, I mean, like it's possible. I Oh, so I'm just having an entry. Sorry, that's my wife.
no worries.
Um, so yeah, but anyway, so space travel.
Yes. So I guess first of all, did you know that NASA is planning to send astronauts back to the moon?
Yes, I did know that. Um,
How
yeah,
did you find out?
Do you know what? I don't. I think this is the Artemis mission, right? Or am I
Yes,
thinking of something else?
that's correct.
You're right. Yeah. I've been reading about it now. It feels like for years. Um, like when they say they're going back in 2024, I usually part of me thinks that, yeah, that means they're going to get there by 2029. You know, it's kind of like you always plan like 7 or 8 delays when it comes to NASA. Um, but yeah, I think it's very exciting. I kind of can't wait to kind of to just be sitting there with my kids around the TV just watching that kind of like the whole like the remake of Neil Armstrong kind of like landed on the moon. That should be really cool.
The video quality should be much improved.
Yeah, well, you would hope. I mean, considering how much you're spending on NASA, you'd think they could get a bit of high def.
Yeah, it's the UFO sightings. I don't know if you've seen that graphic. It's like
Yeah.
video quality and then video of our picture quality of UFO sightings.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. On that.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about us going back to the moon?
Yeah, no, I think it's necessary. Ultimately, I mean, uh, so I mean, like, I think if you're talking about human beings like surviving long term, like really, really long term, I mean, we're way past our kind of like our sell by date compared to most other species on Earth. I mean, we've had a very, very good run. But like, I want more. I don't want to see kind of like I don't want the story to end. And I think that's absolutely like we can't stay here indefinitely. Um Way I see it. So right now within the next 100 years, the big kind of like existential crisis to get over is climate change, which I think we will. I think we've at least avoided the worst case scenarios. I mean, like in the like when I was growing up in the 80s, and like the predictions were for planet hell scenarios. It's like basically if we keep going the way we're going, every human being on Earth is just going to die from heat. We're just gonna cook, and I think we have dodged that. It's not going to not really through any too much effort of our own. It's kind of like it was basically we overestimated how much gas and oil was still in the earth. So it's kind of like imagine you're an alcoholic and you're saying, I'm very worried I'm going to drink myself to death, and someone says, look, don't worry, there's actually not enough booze left in the house for you to do that. So that's good to know. Um, but that does not mean that the future might not get very, very rough if we don't really get our act together. But I think we will survive that. Hopefully, we will come through it out the other side with a much more stable, much more sustainable, much fairer society. But even if we get there and kind of like in Mad Max attire, we'll still be there. I think humanity will still survive in some form. After that, then we've got to avoid um, nuclear war, which is a kind of like it seems so kind of like old fashioned to be talking about. Like it's 2020. We're still talking. That's such a Cold War thing to worry about, but it's still a possibility. And then once we get that, once we get to a point where like war just it doesn't happen anymore. It's just not really kind of like it's just not how we do business anymore. Then we're basically just waiting on for the next asteroid that's big enough to wipe us out. And even if somehow we manage to get our tech together to the point that we can destroy any kind of like world killer with absolute accuracy, 5 billion years, like we're on a ticking timer. Like the sun will explode eventually. So the odds of us surviving on this planet alone forever are zero. I mean, something is going to happen. Either we kill ourselves or the universe does it for us. In which case, our only term of kind of like really, really long term survival is we need to get out of here. We need to kind of like we need to spread out. We need to start colonizing other other systems. Um, now, how we do that, I have absolutely no idea. But I think a lunar mission is a very very important first step. We need to figure out how to do this. We need to figure out how to live on places that we were not designed to live on. Um, and I'm kind of what worries me is that as it's a huge undertaking. It's a huge, very expensive, very time consuming, grueling. Like the first colonists and the first base colonists, they are going to have it's going to be a shit show. I would not. I mean, I would not live on the moon if you put a gun to my head. It's gonna be rough. It is not going to be a fun time. And what worries me is that we have a tendency as a species to only really ramp up our efforts when things are very, very dire. And we always leave it to the last minute. Like we should have been weaning ourselves off fossil fuels when we discovered that global warming was a thing back in the late 70s. Uh, it was only really kind of like when first of all when extreme weather started hitting, and now in Europe, like in Europe, we've been making fantastic gains in moving on to renewable energy and weaning ourselves off fossil fuels. Absolutely phenomenal progress. All it took was, you know, the biggest war on the European continent since, you know, the end of the Second World War. I mean, and that's kind of what that we're only gonna get serious about this when something happens to really kind of like scare the shit out of. Sorry, I realize I'm swearing at an Irish level here. So
No,
if
it's absolutely okay. Be yourself.
okay. So yeah, so that's kind of like I'm hoping we don't need the planetary equivalent of the invasion of Ukraine to finally get us to kind of to start taking this seriously. Um, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
You mentioned being a colonist on the moon, isn't something that you like to do. And, SpaceX, Elon Musk, he's like really focused on the colony on Mars.
Mm.
And his chief operation officer, who actually, runs the day-to-day operations, Gwen Shotwell, says she has no interest of being a colonist on Mars because, it's going to be like camping and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So,
Well, I mean, and I would also say like they're looking at the wrong planet. I think. I think um, Mars is overrated. I think like Venus. Like, yeah, I mean, yes, it's hot. It is. It's a challenging climate, but I think like there's potential there to get a. I think Venus actually has the greater rewards if we kind of like if we focused on it. Like there's actually I think there's actually a layer of breathable atmosphere in there's just kind of like this one little kind of like I think I read that somewhere. There is actually a spot in the Venusian atmosphere where if you built it kind of like a George Jetson kind of like style, house on a pole, you could actually breathe it. Or maybe it would be maybe I'm remembering that wrong, or at least the temperature is right. I don't know, but it is kind of like if you were able to put the work in, you would get a much more Earth-like planet than you could ever get on Mars, just simply by dint of the fact that Mars is too far from the sun and it's so much smaller. So anyone that lives on there is going to be like ruined for traveling back to Earth just because the gravity will just kind of like will work them over with a crowbar. Um, yep. So again, sorry, I have a tendency to ramble.
no, it's great. Well, You might be interested to know Rocket Labs, which actually started out as a New Zealand company, is sending a mission to Venus to a probe type of thing.
Okay, fantastic.
There's some renewed interest in Venus
Mm.
as well. I think last year somebody just discovered this um, phosphine or something that apparently could be only produced by most likely produced by microbial life, and so that kind of creates
Oh,
some interest
interesting.
there. But
Yeah.
I think there's some doubts on if that was
I really hope there isn't. I really hope. I think if we discover life on anywhere in our immediate vicinity, that's very, very bad news for us. Just because Fermi's paradox. Um, so if basically if like so if you could have life on Venus, you can have life anywhere. In
hmm,
which case, where are all the alien civilizations? What's happening to them? Um, so I think that would basically mean that there is a very kind of like hard limit on how far a civilization can get, which would be very, very bad news for us. But still, that is also kind of cool and terrifying. So
indeed. Um, I kind of wonder what motivated people to go to a space colony, and in the Caspian Republic, uh, they basically have to create an isolated society on Earth. But at the same token, the rest of the Earth society is a constant pressure and influence, and it's always there regardless of how close they try to make the society.
yeah,
And I just wonder if one of the early motivations is similar to like some of the people that came to America from Europe, was to kind of create their own little isolated community set up along their own terms.
yeah, no, and that was absolutely it. It was basically they saw the kind of like the just the they understood the massive transformation of human society that was coming, and they saw so what I basically what one of the things I wanted to set out to do was create a totalitarian system based around an ideal that the reader was probably quite sympathetic to, and in that way kind of like show this is like fascists don't just kind of like show up and say we're going to do very bad things and we're going to destroy the country and no, they tell you what you want to hear. They tell you we understand your problems, we understand why you're angry, and we're going to fix these things, and we're kind of like, and I think I kind of like I wanted to kind of like show this is how these guys work. They find your weaknesses and they kind of like they get their fingers into the cracks there. Like I remember I was telling my mother about kind of like about Caspian and why it was founded and the kind of like the ideals of Caspian, and she was like, "Wait a minute, these are the bad guys." And you can get yeah, and you can kind of like you can definitely see like why you would be worried about um what like about losing kind of like the things that you feel make you human. Um, and I like here's the thing. I know that in the world of the book, because I created the book, that Contran is works. That you basically, if you download your soul onto into a digital form, you're still you. You're still essentially you. And I know that because I wrote the book. If someone came to me in real life and offered me to do it, I would say, not a chance in hell. Like I have no, I say, no, it's fine. Look, this person is kind of like is there online. You can talk to them instead of say, that's a fucking chatbot. That's a very convincing chatbot. There is no way you have figured out how to do this. It's the same way with the transporter in Star Trek. It's just like, we just step on this and we just turn you into energy, and what comes out the other side, it's exactly you. It's exactly no, you're dead. You are dead. You cannot take someone's atoms apart and just reassemble them, and it's still the same person. It's like no, it does not work that way. Um, so yeah, I mean, I can absolutely understand why they established Caspian. Um, it's just that the only way it could continue to survive, or the only way they felt that they could survive, is just by shutting themselves off from the rest of the world and becoming more rigid and be more ideologically pure. And that's how they just kind of like they began this slow descent into kind of like into one party tyranny.
But even with like Stasek and Parsec, they still don't have absolute control over society. It's
No,
like
I mean you can't um like I mean I love 1984. I think it's a fantastic book. But it's not. I wouldn't hold it up as a fantastic example of realistic world building, because that's not what Orwell set out to do. What he Orwell wanted to do is basically just to scare any kind of like sympathies for totalitarianism right out of you. Um, the society that he present, it wouldn't work. You can't even like North Korea, which kind of like has come as close as pretty much any society has. You can't put cameras in people's minds. You can't control every thought. No government can employ enough secret police to watch every corner, every bench. Um, you will always People will always find a way to just carve out a little um, circle of freedom for themselves in their own lives. Which is ultimately why I think that's what gives me hope that ultimately all of these systems will eventually fail. The only way you can build a system that will last is if the people living under that system want it to last. Um, that's kind of like that's always you're kind of like your best defense against kind of like overthrow is if there are too many people who would stand to lose too much if the current system was gone.
hmm.
So would you rather live like, even though you might feel you might do better in a kind of like in a dictatorship, hopefully enough people in the population realize that no, that would actually probably fucking suck. Um, but maybe that's probably just me being hopelessly naive, but I hope it's true.
Well, I was thinking more of a geography in the sense that any society on Earth that tries to close itself off, be it the Amish or some type of commune or
Mm.
North Korea, um, it's like impossible to do. Like
Yeah.
the rest of the world is an ever present force, and I
Mm.
just wonder if that might be motivation for those societies to pack up and set up a settlement on a different world like
Yeah.
Mars, where you're you don't have that constant presence of the
You are
rest of the
going to,
world.
yeah, I think if once space travel if it ever becomes kind of like economically viable, um that pretty much that it's not just the purvey of like a few massive corporations or a few superpowers. It basically any medium-sized organization can just kind of get on a ship and get out there. Yeah, you'll see loads of kind of essentially new kind of like Plymouth Rocks of just pilgrims just kind of like saying, we want to create a world of our own. We want to run according to our rules and our vision for the world. Yeah, you'll see that. Like, you'll see those popping up all over the place, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, and then that becomes kind of interesting. You have sort of like these competitive societies. I guess it'd be like the early days in North America with the European
Yeah,
settlers too.
yeah, um, yeah. Which very could be a very very interesting setting for a book.
It could be. I hope to read it one day. um, so if you could, would you take a trip to space?
Depends on what you mean by a trip. I mean, if you say to me, Neil, we'll take you up and you can experience zero gravity for a day and then bring you back home, I'd be like, yeah, sure, absolutely. So who would say no to that? If you're paying. If you're saying, Neil, go and get on the ship, we're going to take you to Mars, it'll become like 5 year round trip. I'll be like, no, I got stuff to do. You know, I've got Netflix. I've got a backlog to get through. No.
Well, actually, that might help with that. I mean, you got plenty of time.
Yeah, you see, I don't know if the what the kind of like the coverage would be out there, you know. Um, yeah, no, I like my life here. I'm kind of like I'm turning 40 this year. I've kind of like I've got my nice comfortable little rut on this. I think the people that you see going into space will be kind of like they'll be young and they will be like miserable with they're just like just let get me off this planet. I'm just kind of like I don't want to live here anymore, and that's fine, you know, because that's why you know that's why God created miserable young people. It's just that they could go out and do the stuff that you know the rest of us are too kind of like you know settled and comfortable to do.
Which is kind of scary as we become an older population, kind of more
Yeah,
entrenched.
yeah, true. Um,
Um, so which one of your characters from When the Sparrow Falls do you think would be most likely to take a trip to Mars?
right. That's a good question. Um, See, the thing is, when the Sparrow Falls, like pretty much all my characters are quite old. Like Nikolai is in his 50s at the start. Same with Gussie and Sally. Like they're kind of. I actually prefer writing older characters. I like writing characters that have kind of like a lot of history and a kind of like a lot of miles on the odometer because it opens up more like you can plausibly say oh this character has a child or a grandchild or you know fought in the war many years ago. It just gives you you know the thing in anime where you kind of like you have these teenage characters who've had like you know five jobs and kind of uh, like you know they fought in three different wars and it's like no you know give me a character who's kind of like long in the tooth so they kind of like you know you can do that a bit you can have that kind of like backstory a bit more plausibly. um I think Lily would. I think Lily would be because she's an AI and she could use an artificial body, so a lot of, or a robot body. So a lot of the kind of like a lot of the problems that uh would affect a human body in a zero gravity environment, they're not going to really be a problem for her. Also, she's kind of like she's 85 years old and she will kind of like aging is not really something that she has to worry about. So she doesn't have to like worry, well, you know, if I leave, I'll be kind of like I'll be an old woman by the time I get back. She'll be like pretty much exactly the same no matter how long the journey takes. So I think yeah, Lily would take the trip into space. I don't think any of the human Caspian characters would.
Hmm, that's that's interesting. Well, you know, I've read the I'm in my second time through the book, and I find it's really a book you have to read multiple times
Oh, thank
because
you.
um, you know that there's little subtle hints that go unnoticed the first time through. That after you've read the whole story, you see the whole book in a different light. It's really really amazing.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, Neil, I guess if you were to speak to people that were looking at this video 100 years from now, that were looking at this, what I think is going to be a transformative decade in terms of space travel. I see this as sort of like 1900s decade with air travel. Like we have the Wright brothers, they had their first flight, but nobody's talking about airports and you know frequent flyer miles or anything like that. So it's kind of an interesting time period to have a conversation about the future of space and the future of humanity. Whereas now is not a good time to have a good conversation about the future of aviation because it's kind of like a set idea in everybody's mind on how that
True, yeah.
works. Um, so I was wondering if you had something that you thought would be cool for people 100 years from now, looking back at this kind of transformational decade.
Um, wow. That's no pressure.
Yeah,
Um, we I hope you will not judge us too harshly. I hope you know that we're, for the most part, we tried to do as best as we could, and we tried to be good, and we didn't always. We often often failed, but um, the fact that you're here, you're there watching this, means we must have done something right. So keep on, keep the story alive, and know that we love you.
I think that's awesome, Neil, and I really appreciate your time. It was such a pleasure to get to talk to you. I I definitely hope more people read your book. I think
Thank you so much.
I think they
Yeah,
would
you, me,
benefit a
and my
lot
bank
from it.
account.
Say again?
You, me, and my bank account. Thank you, and my
Yes.
agent.
Well, I've already proposed it for our book club, so
Oh, well, look, if you want me to kind of like to zoom in and answer people's questions, I'd be delighted to.
oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah, I need to get a few more. I'm not as good as uh, you know, some of the characters in the Caspian Republic about aligning the votes just right. So, but
Well,
I thought I made a strong case, so
okay,
I still have my fingers crossed.
okay. Well, if it works out, let me know. I'd be happy to pop my head in.
That would be fantastic. Well, Neil, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you, and
Likewise.
I hope you have a good rest of your day. And
You too.
okay,
All
well,
right.
take
Take care,
care.
man. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.
Thanks so much.